Hey, Sydney.
Hey, Samuel.
If you had to be alone in the woods with a bear or Pat Bateman, which one are you picking this week?
I'd pick like 5 bears. Include a polar bear maybe in the mix.
I'm glad you're here on this Sunday. I'm going to get right into the message. I'm going to tell it like it is, as they say. Oh, I heard a hallelujah. Did you think I don't know what the hell is going on? And a lot of strange places. Where in the hell have you been? Hell fire! Hell fire! Hell fire! All right. Okay, there's something else, too.
Hello and welcome to the Satire Fire, your premier destination for Patty Winter's show reviews. I am Samuel.
And I'm Sydney.
And this week we are going to be starting our series on the much discussed, much thought about book, American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. If you are new to the podcast, the way that we typically structure things is that Sydney and I alternate between who is covering a specific book, and so this series is going to be mainly covered by me. I'm going to be telling Sydney all about the plot of the book, all about the historical context of the book, and everything else that would be good to know about it. Also, if it's your first episode, then you might not know that the structure within those series is that every book is broken into 3 parts. This is part 1, where we're going to be talking about specifically the plot of American Psycho, just so if you haven't read it, you have a little bit of a understanding of what the book is about, or if you have read it, it gives you a little bit of a recap in case it's been a while and you don't remember everything. Part 2 next week is going to be a historical context about the book, talking about some of the history behind its themes, the response to the book, the background of the author, all those things that are going to be good to know for part 3, which is going to be a analysis and kind of overall interpretation. What is the book doing? Is it doing it well? Did we enjoy it? All of those fun things. But before we do any of that discussing about the book, let's kill some time first. Sydney, have you been reading or doing or watching anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, last week, well, it's not really relevant what week it was, because you guys have no idea what week we're recording this. Anyways.
We're actually recording this in 2021.
Recently, I had some friends come visit me in New York, and we did some, fun things throughout the city, but then we spent just 2 days in Boston. And for all you listeners out there, I used to live in Boston for just a year, so it was nice to go back, but we did 2 cool things that I want to talk about. One was I finally tried a Korean corn dog, which I've been wanting to do for I don't know, since I heard about Korean corn dogs, but they're kind of I don't know, they're lacking in nutritional value. It's not something you're just gonna do.
They're kind of like carnival food, right?
Yeah,
I know of a Korean corn dog, but I've not had one. Could you explain what the difference is?
So it can be a hot dog of any kind, beef hot dog. I'm sure maybe they make them with vegan hot dogs, don't know. Or some of them are stuffed with mozzarella cheese in the middle rather than a cheese log rather than a hot dog, but I got one with a hot dog. So it's a hot dog, and then the batter, rather than using cornmeal like a corn dog is, it's a sweeter batter.
Okay.
And then it's crusted on the outside with something crunchy, like breadcrumbs or whatever, and then they put all kinds of different toppings on them. And so the one I got had sriracha mayo and crumbled hot Cheetos on the outside. Okay. So it was just craziness. It was delicious. It was so good, but it is a carnival food, definitely. It's not something you want to be eating every day, nor should you. but I was really glad I got to try it. And then the other thing we did, maybe more interesting, is that we went whale watching. And I've never been whale watching, but we went out into like the Massachusetts Bay, so past the Boston Harbor, all the way into the bay. And it's like you're at a point where you can't really see land anymore, so you feel like you're in the middle of the ocean, even though you're not at all. but we saw one whale, and it's kind of funny because then we just like stalked this singular whale for like 2 hours. Like we're just following her around and like watching her go down on dives and then come back up and go down. But she was a humpback whale, and we got to see her tail when she would, what's that called? Fluke, yeah, stick their tail in the air. And she was huge, and apparently she's like kind of a smaller one, but she was huge. And then at one point she breached, is what they call it, so like that's when they jump out of the water fully. And I didn't fully see her when she did that, but I saw like the very end of it and the splash that came of it, which was crazy, but really cool experience. I'd always wanted to do that. I got sunburnt, so if you go whale watching, wear sunscreen, because I didn't. Forgot how, like, when you're out in the ocean, it's just sun. There's nothing blocking the sun, no trees. There's no trees in the ocean. You heard it here. So, yeah, but it was really cool.
If you're going to go out and get exposed to UV, don't forget your Pat Bateman skin routine. We've got to stay looking young, folks. We've got to use those masks, those lotions, those balms, those salves. God forbid we age. I want to look like an 80-year-old baby. So smooth.
That's what they're trying to do these days with the skincare routines on the internet. Like, have you seen those articles about like the 9-year-olds who are like using their retinol so they don't get...
Yeah. It's so crazy to me. And this is probably something we can talk more about as we're talking about the context of the book. But it is the fear of death for the average person being turned into a fear of aging, being turned into a fear of looking old. Like the cycle is never ending, and it's just it's so interesting to me.
But what about you? Have you been eating any Korean corn dogs or watching whales or something else?
I don't know. There's a food truck near me that does specialty corn dogs, but I don't think they do specifically Korean corn dogs, and I've never been, so I wouldn't actually know. But I also haven't been watching any whales in my landlocked city recently.
Yeah, that makes sense. You could go to the coast.
But I did recently read another... This might not be back to back. I feel like this was 2 weeks ago that you talked about it. But I read a Sally Rooney book. I read Conversations with Friends, which was her debut novel, and now puts me at a point where I believe I only have one of her books left, and I will have read all of her long-form fiction at this point.
Which one do you have left?
So the only one that I have left, I actually already own a copy of it. But it is Beautiful World, Where Are You? Which, if I'm right, I'm pretty sure is the one that came out after Normal People, but before Intermezzo. I could have the timeline on that wrong. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that that's how it goes. But Conversations with Friends was really good, really interesting. It plays with all of the same themes and ideas as all of the other books of hers that I've read. So if you like Sally Rooney, you're gonna like Conversations with Friends. If you dislike Sally Rooney, I don't think you're gonna like this book, particularly because it is like an earlier endeavor, and so I feel like it lacks some of the complexity and lacks a little bit of the depth that her more recent work has had. But it's following a very similar idea of two people who are main characters that are navigating relationships and sex and friendship and identity amongst a group of other people, and it's dealing with the ideas of what does infidelity look like, what can polygamy look like? What does an open relationship do to the people that are in it, and how can it be beneficial? It's dealing with age gaps, relationships, and stuff like that. And it just, yeah, the things that I like about it are the things that I like about every Sally Rooney book, where I just think that she writes good characters.
Yeah.
And I like being able to read a book where from just scene to scene, I am wildly frustrated by and also incredibly sympathetic towards the main characters, where they're doing things that I'm like, that you're actively making both your and the people around you's lives worse because of the way that you're behaving, while also saying, yeah, but what can you do? That's just kind of that's how life is sometimes. Sometimes you've just got to act out a little bit. And so I really enjoyed it. I recommend it. I don't know if I was introducing someone to Sally Rooney, I would give them this one. I still think that depending on the person, it would either be Normal People or Intermezzo. I think Intermezzo is the best book that she's written. I think Normal People is probably the most approachable book that she's written. But it's still really good. I would highly recommend it. Give it a chance. If you haven't read Sally Rooney, you should. I don't think that she's for everyone, but if she's for you, you'll like everything that she's written.
We need, when you finish reading all Sally Rooney's current books, we need a ranking, which I think I can guess how it's going to go, but yeah.
I mean, it depends. Right now, I know for sure what the ranking is. It's just a matter of figuring out where Beautiful World fits in with the rest of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But speaking of beautiful worlds and affairs and beautiful people, let's talk about American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. Now, this is a relatively well-known book, if not well-read. I don't feel like I've talked to or discussed this book with very many people, but I feel like, if only because of the movie and the memes made out of the movie, this book is very well known and definitely has a reputation for the content within it. If you're unfamiliar and you've not read this book, just as a heads up, this book gets very, very violent and very graphically so. And so if that's not something that you're interested in, not something that you feel like you would have a good time reading, don't worry about it. I'll tell you all about it, and you don't have to actually put up with it.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of people have seen the movie, for sure. But, yeah.
One of the things to note as we're getting into a plot summary is that this book is less of a story and more of a character study. And so it doesn't really have much in the way of a plot. There is things happening in a series, but more than a story, it's really just trying to get you into the head of this character and then have you watch him fall apart. So it's going to be kind of interesting trying to do a plot summary because a lot of things happen, not a lot of them are really important, but I feel like I should mention a lot of them just to give you an idea, because really this book works as a almost tonally oppressive force where you just slowly read more and more about this character and this world and these ideas, and the weight, the summation of all of these events is what starts to wear on you and starts to really push the themes home. So we'll see. I'll do my best. If I miss something important, maybe Sydney can mention it, and if neither of us pick up something that I've left off, let me know in the comments if you think that I've missed something that is really thematically relevant. But I'll start by talking about some of the characters in the book, and it's worth noting almost every character is intentionally interchangeable. All of the men get called by different names throughout. They're constantly confusing one another with other people. And the women are really seen more as objects from the main character's perspective than anything else. And so he doesn't really do anything to characterize or flesh very many of them out. Everyone is just rich white, healthy, well-dressed, and incredibly vapid. They all went to a fancy college, they all got a business degree, they all work on Wall Street, and they're all doing cocaine.
Well, some of them are doing, like, what is it, Valium, or no?
Yeah, some of them are doing lithium. Some of them are doing lithium.
That's it, yeah.
Some of them are doing various other drugs, but yeah, they love cocaine in the 80s. The main men in the book are going to be Pat Bateman, who is the narrator, main character. He's in his mid-20s. He's very handsome, and he has a meaningless Wall Street job that pays him way too much money. There's the foil to Pat Bateman, who is Paul Owen. He also works on Wall Street. We don't learn a lot about Paul Owen other than the fact that he is handling a really, really big account at the firm that he's working out, the Fisher account. And Pat Bateman is very jealous of him.
Yeah, he hates that guy.
He hates Paul Owen, and Paul Owen does not think about Pat Bateman at all. There's Lewis Carruthers, who is dating Courtney, who I'm going to talk about here in a minute. He is one of the social circle that Pat Bateman runs around in. He is also a closeted gay man who thinks that Pat Bateman is in love with him, which we'll get into. And last, this guy's not in the book a lot, but I think he's important for interpreting and understanding the book, and that is Tim Price. Tim Price is a friend of Pat Bateman who early on in the book gets overwhelmed by living in the society that they're all living in and just runs away. And he disappears for most of the book before he finally shows up later in the book again. But his whole character arc is basically him having a nervous breakdown, disappearing for the whole book, and then coming back. The women in the book who are noteworthy, all of them are interesting, but very few of them Pat Bateman cares enough about to actually talk to or about regularly. But the ones that do make recurring appearances are Evelyn Richards, who is the girlfriend and then fiance of Pat Bateman. There's Jean, who is Pat's secretary, who is in love with him.
My secretary, who is in love with me.
That's a recurring joke throughout the book. She is his secretary, and basically every time that he mentions her in the narrative, he goes, Jean, my secretary, who's in love with me. Then there's Courtney Lawrence, who I mentioned earlier. Courtney dating Lewis. She and Pat Bateman are having an affair together. That's also worth noting. Basically, everyone is committing some amount of adultery and infidelity. Evelyn is sleeping with Tim Price. Courtney is sleeping with Pat. All of the guys are constantly going out and just being womanizers in the bars, regardless of if they have a girlfriend or not. Everybody's sleeping with everybody. And then the last woman that I was going to mention, who I also am going to talk about later because I think she's important, is Bethany. And she is Pat's college romance / the girl that got away. He had a thing for her in college. They broke up, lost contact, and in the book they regain contact with one another. So those are our cast of characters to take us into this. Was there any specific character that you think is worth bringing up, or any character? Were there any characters that you liked in this book? Because most of them are despicable as human people.
Not really. I think I felt sad for some of the women. But,
as you should, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because I didn't like Evelyn, but I was aw. And Bethany, I guess I kind of liked Bethany.
I think of all of them, Bethany and Jean are the most normal. I really liked Jean as a character.
But
Bethany
she was
okay.
Really, yeah. Jean was really I couldn't tell if it was just the way she was written or if she was actually not in love with him, but I guess she might have just been trying to survive as a secretary. And
we'll talk about it, but she misses a lot of red flags when it comes to Pat Bateman.
Yeah. So I was always kind of like, gee. But yeah.
So, like I said, the plot itself is more of like a series of events trying to show you the archetype of Pat Bateman, because it's trying to make a commentary on this type of person, and kind of like a straw man argument almost of being like, oh, we all know these finance bros, this is what they're actually like taking what they're like in the real world and then expanding the metaphor of their behavior into a real character. It also has, the whole book is really like stream of consciousness that carries throughout, and so things are very like disorganized. You're jumping months at a time between different chapters. One chapter will happen and have a half-hearted resolution, and then the next chapter has nothing to do with the chapter before it. Like, it's just jumping all over the place. And it's also worth noting that you are supposed to understand Pat Bateman to be an unreliable narrator of, like, the ultimate degree. And so, basically, anything that happens in the book could have not happened, and it's really tough to know if it happened or if it didn't happen. And that tension really kind of carries you through the book of saying, well, I've got to know, is any of this real?
Yeah.
The book opens with a bang. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. That's spray painted on the side of a bank, and it's the first words that we see in the book. And we are meeting Tim and Pat, who are riding in a taxi through New York City. And we're getting to see Tim starting to have his doubts about the world that he's living in. He says that, am I alone in thinking that we don't get paid enough? And we're also getting introduced to the setting of the book, which is New York in the 1980s. And we're also getting to see the way that our characters feel about the world that they live in. And I really liked this. One of the ways that it is setting the stage is that Tim is reading a newspaper, and he, in order to talk about how bad the world is, just starts listing the different things that have happened in the newspaper. And so it goes, in one issue, let's see here. Strangled models, babies thrown from tenement rooftops, kids killed in the subway, a communist rally, mafia boss wiped out, Nazis, baseball players with AIDS, more mafia shit, gridlock, the homeless, various maniacs, faggots dropping like flies in the streets, surrogate mothers, the cancellation of soap operas, kids who broke into a zoo and tortured and burned various animals alive, more Nazis. And the joke is, the punchline is, it's all in this city, nowhere else, just here, it sucks. Which is already hinting at some of the humor that's throughout the book, where it's these people thinking that the problems that they're seeing are incredibly localized, when actually it's talking more about a societal problem and societal issues. I also like that it is conflating and like saying that it is equally important that there are Nazis and also a soap opera got canceled. I enjoyed that, but we're getting to see that these characters are dissatisfied with their world and also hate poor people. Just hate them. Have a visceral reaction to them. Tim is actually going through this whole intro scene, counting every homeless person he sees, and is just so mad. Not that the unhoused people are unhoused, but that they just exist. Like, he just wants them to disappear.
Yeah. That first chapter, I was like hating Tim more than I hated Pat, and I was like, but I knew that like Patrick Bateman was the serial killer. And so I was like, why am I hating Tim so much? But, yeah.
It takes a while. Like, it's a slow burn to get to Pat being a bad guy. Like, early on, he's actually calling people out for being racist and homophobic. Like, he's random. White knighting in a couple of scenes. It's interesting. But just talking about that, They are in the cab because they go to a dinner party that Evelyn is throwing with a few people there, including some of her art friends who don't fit in with the Wall Street crowd at all. One of them's name is Stash, which I really thought was funny. And while they're there, Bateman does this monologue about what problems in the world need to be addressed. And this is another one where it's pointing very directly at what this book is about. Because his monologue is pointing to these social issues that are totally contradicting one another and not addressing what the actual root cause is. So he's saying stuff like, we need to protect the right to life, and also we need to protect a woman's right to choose. We need to prevent the raising of income taxes, but also we need to provide more social programs. Stuff that just, you can't do both of them at the same time. And showing them these rich people as being that middle ground that's kind of like the stopping block of allowing the good stuff to happen, because they're trying to keep perpetuating the more negative aspects of society. Then we get to what was maybe, it's only 20 pages in, it's the first time I laughed out loud at this book, which is where after the dinner party, Pat and Tim and Evelyn are hanging out, and Tim says something kind of off-kilter and says, oh yeah, Pat agrees with me on that. And Evelyn says, no, Pat doesn't agree with you. Pat is too good for that. And it goes, oh, he does not. With a Kleenex, Evelyn wipes off whatever she rubbed on. Patrick is not a cynic, Timothy. He's the boy next door. Aren't you, honey? No, I'm not. I whispered to myself. I'm a fucking evil psychopath.
Wait, I wrote that down. It also made me laugh.
But it's really showing you how unserious and uncharismatic Pat Bateman is internally. Like, he has this internal picture of who he is, and he's this, like, badass kind of guy. Externally, he's just not that at all. We then, after the dinner party and everything, get the famous morning montage, where it's just Pat talking about all of the expensive shit in his house and his 300-step skincare routine and his exercise regimen and just all of the stuff that he does to try and maintain his appearance.
And it's also where we, like, determine that he has, like, OCD or something. We're like,
yeah.
Like, go with this guy.
It's very TikTok grind set coded of, like, watching those, like, I woke up at 4 a.m. and this is how I start my morning. Like, it's so interesting that this predates those videos and that style of content so much. And it's also another thing that it's talking about that has become more of a thing now is it's talking a lot about eating and body image. And one of the things that I made a note of is that it's talking a lot about the conflation of consumption with health, where, like, if you're not healthy, you can kind of buy your way out of it. I thought that was a really interesting thing for it to be touching on this early on.
I saw this article that was like, why are Gen Z men obsessed with Patrick Bateman? And I was like, I'm scared. Like, I don't...
Yeah, that's something that I'm going to talk more about in the analysis episode, but I do think that there is a case to be made where some people who don't like this book say that it is too on the nose and too over the top. But my argument against that is that there's too many people that idolize Pat Bateman for it to be too on the nose. Like, if you still like Pat Bateman at the end of it, then it was not clear enough. You are the asshole. Now we start getting into, like, the routine of the book, basically, where it's Pat goes somewhere fancy with his friends. Pat talks about music that he likes. Pat does a heinous act of violence against a woman. And then it just kind of, like, does that cycling throughout the rest of the book. Early on, it's talking some more about health trends that I thought was really funny, where it specifically somebody in the background is saying, did you know that cavemen get more fiber than we do these days? Which is a thing that I hear all the time when it comes to, like, omega-3 fatty acids or protein or organ meat. Like, cavemen got more than we did. Again, I think it's interesting how prescient the book was on that becoming more of a thing today. But early on, like I said, when I was talking about the characters, they're at a club. Tim Price snaps. He jumps over the railing in a club onto some abandoned subway tracks and then just runs off down the tunnel. And he's just gone from the book.
Right?
It's so funny.
Right before that, they were like making fun of him for saying how much he made in a year. And I wrote down this quote. They're like, haha, like, Price, what do you do? Like, say, here's a krona, and by the way, I pull in 180,000 a year. So what's your sign? And then Price was like, it's actually 190,000 or something. It was like,
there are, and this is something that I was going to talk about in a little bit, but it's interesting to me that the way in which the characters talk about women, and I am curious if the author is making a critique of the way that women in this world behave, or if it's just extending the critique that he's making of the men. Like, I think that at one point it just talks about how women want a man who can give them really nice gifts, can get them into reservations at the nicest clubs, or potentially is a close personal friend of Donald Trump. And those are like the only things that a woman really cares about if she's going to have sex with you or not. And there's a couple of women who do kind of behave that way throughout the book, but I was interested if that's more of just a critique of, oh, these men view these women as less than a full human being. This is all that they really care about. After this, we start to see what it is that Pat Bateman does for a job, which essentially is just sitting at a desk. Like, he doesn't do anything. He just kind of works out for 3 hours in the morning and then goes to his office for an hour and then goes on a lunch appointment with his friends and then goes to dinner with his friends. And, like, that's his whole job. Like, he does nothing throughout the whole book other than occasionally push files around his desk. It's also around this point where we get introduced to his obsession with the local video store, which I'm all for. Supporting physical media. Let's go. Slay Pat Bateman. But specifically, he really likes checking out hardcore porn, and he loves lesbian porn. He's a big fan of fetishizing lesbians.
of course he is.
This is when we get a early on scene where up until this point, there's not been any physical manifestation of him being a crazy person. He's just kind of said things and people haven't acknowledged that he's saying them. Then he starts taking his clothes to a dry cleaner and he's arguing with the dry cleaner because they didn't remove the blood stains that he has on his sheets and on his Armani shirt. And now we're getting into more of like, is he imagining the blood stains or are they actually there? It's like a whole thing, but this is kind of like the first time that we're seeing, oh, this guy might actually be a violent person.
He's also starting to really, like, I feel like that chapter, at least for me, it became really clear, like, that he was kind of, like, hallucinating things and just, like, wasn't fully stable. Because he also, like, I don't know, he's being kind of violent. Like, he tells the woman at the dry cleaner he's gonna kill her, but then I actually don't know if he said that because then he was just having like a normal conversation after that.
Yeah.
And then he thought that like there's like a girl sitting on a stoop, and he thought she was a homeless woman, but she was just a Columbia student. And then he's like in the taxi and he's like hallucinating. He's like, the building's hallucinating to mountains, and like it's like, oh, like, are you on drugs or are you in psychosis? Like, I didn't really know what was happening there.
Yeah, and like a little bit after that, I had flagged a scene where that happens, and I felt like it was a really good example of, is he really saying this shit or not? Because nobody reacts when he says something that's just insane. So he's like at dinner with, I believe he's with Evelyn and then another couple, and they're talking about California or post-California cuisine, and Bateman is talking and says, I've heard of post-California cuisine, I say, acutely aware of the design of the restaurant. the exposed pipe and the columns and the open pizza kitchen and the deck chairs. In fact, I've eaten it. No baby vegetables, scallops and burritos, wasabi crackers. Am I on the right track? And by the way, did anyone ever tell you that you look exactly like Garfield but run over and skinned and then someone threw an ugly Ferragamo sweater over you before they rushed you to the vet? Fusilli? Olive oil on brie? Exactly, Anne says, impressed. Oh, Courtney, where did you find Patrick? And they just move on as though he did not just, because he might not have, said, oh, you look like Garfield if he got run over by a fucking truck.
I wrote down there, I was like, I wonder if he, like, thinks he's saying his intrusive thoughts out loud and is confused why no one's reacting, or...
It then shows him having sex with Courtney, and it gets, like, violent and coercive, but she, like, seems used to it because she just kind of, like, goes with it, and she clearly doesn't have a very good time, but at the end of it, she's, like, interested in participating in more sex. It's got the scene, another scene that is, like, it's not funny if it was really real life happening, but it was funny in the context of the book where he's trying to assuage her concerns about whether or not he's wearing a condom correctly. And it says, I grab her head and force her to look at the placement of the condom. See? Happy? You dumb bitch? Are you happy, you dumb bitch?
She's like, oh, Pat.
And she's just like, oh, this guy. Another thing, there's like a couple of topics that run throughout the book that are like either recurring jokes or recurring themes, depending on how you look at them. One of them is something called the Patty Winter Show, which we talked about earlier, which is kind of like the embodiment of daytime TV. There's Les Mis. They love talking about Les Mis, which is something I'll do a little bit more about in our analysis episode. And they love talking about Donald Trump. There's so much more Donald Trump in this book than I was expecting there to be. But Pat Bateman idolizes Donald Trump, which is so funny to me. And it goes to a point where Pat has a opinion about a restaurant that they visited where he doesn't like it. And then the guy that he was arguing with about whether or not it was good shows up in the office with a newspaper review from Donald Trump saying that this place is the best place in town. And Pat says, listen, if the pizza at Pastel's is okay with Donnie, I start, hating to admit this to McDermott, then sighing, almost unintelligibly. It's okay with me.
Oh, he's a crush.
Pat and Evelyn continue to be in a relationship for God knows what reason. And they go on a date where she is confronting him about getting married and getting proposed to and stuff like that. And he just basically is spending the whole time fantasizing a fetishization of lesbian sex and like the idea of forcing Evelyn at gunpoint to have a threesome with him. And it's after this scene, like a quarter of the way through the book, I think it's like chapter 16, Tuesday is the chapter title, where the book takes a hard turn. Because now we get to first see Pat Bateman behave violently on screen, where after hanging out at a dinner, he goes into an alley and he murders an unhoused person and also breaks the legs of his dog, which is fucked up. But it's also when we really start getting into the relationship between what this book is saying, where it's talking about this archetype of the rich and how they are predating on poor people. And so I was going to talk through this conversation that he has before he murders the homeless person. I'm not going to get into the violent murder description. And I'm probably going to have to cut out, I'm pretty sure he says some racial slurs in here. I'm not going to say those.
There's like a lot of slurs in this book in general of many types. Mm-hmm. And like, I think it's a combination of like commentary on these people, as well as it was the 80s. Not that
Yeah.
yeah.
But it starts with, "Hello," I say, offering my hand, the one the dog licked. "Pat Bateman." The bum stares at me, panting with the exertion it takes to sit up. He doesn't shake my hand. "You want some money?" I ask gently. "Some food?" The bum nods and starts to cry, thankfully. I reach into my pocket and pull out a $10 bill, then change my mind and hold out a 5 instead. "Is this what you need?" The bum nods again and looks away shamefully, his nose running, and after clearing his throat says quickly, "I'm so hungry." "It's cold out too," I say. "Isn't it?" "I'm so hungry." He convulses once, twice, a third time, then looks away, embarrassed. "Why don't you get a job?" I ask, the bill still held in my hand, but not within the bum's reach. "If you're so hungry, why don't you get a job?" He breathes in, shivering, and between sobs admits, "I lost my job." "Why?" I ask, genuinely interested. "Were you drinking? Is that why you lost it? Insider trading? Just joking. No, really. Were you drinking on the job?" He hugs himself, between sobs, chokes. I was fired. I was laid off." I take this in, nodding. "Gee, that's too bad." "I'm so hungry," he says, then starts crying hard while holding himself. His dog, the thing called Gizmo, starts whimpering. "Why don't you get another one?" I ask. "Why don't you get another job?" "I'm not," he coughs, holding himself, shaking miserably, violently, unable to finish the sentence. "You're not what?" I ask softly. "Qualified for anything else?" "I'm hungry," he whispers. I know that, I say. "Geez, you're like a broken record. I'm trying to help you." My impatience rises. "I'm hungry," he repeats. "Listen, do you think it's fair to take money from people who do have jobs, who do work?" His face crumples and he gasps, his voice raspy. "What am I going to do?" And then it goes on from there with him insisting that he gets a job and then beating him to death. We've all heard this rhetoric before of why don't you have it. Like, this is tried and true. And like I said, this is really just emphasizing what this book is going to be about. Now, immediately following this is a chapter-length discussion of what Pat Bateman thinks about the band Genesis. And this is like one of the first examples that run throughout the book where something violent happens and then he basically just puts in a blog post of what he thinks about a specific pop band that Pat Bateman enjoys. It's really interesting, and I think that we can talk more about why he's doing that later on. But moving on from there, there's a couple more scenes where he's just in bars. There's a funny scene. Again, everything in here that I say is funny is like deeply troubling. But there's a scene where he's walking outside and he sees a gay pride parade and it makes him so upset he has to run home and kill a dog that he bought because he just hates gay people that much. Another important scene happens where Pat with Paul Owen and their two partners go to a U2 concert, and Pat has a hallucination where Bono is talking directly to him and says, "I am the devil and I am just like you." Things get increasingly chaotic. There's a chapter that starts like in media res and Pat is in the middle of a nervous breakdown. But then immediately after that, things just continue. He returns home after hanging out from his friends, and he's watching his favorite show, which is the Patty Winters show. And it talks throughout. It references Patty Winters' show, different episode titles and stuff like that. I really liked this one where it goes, "The Patty Winters show this morning was about Nazis, and, inexplicably, I got a real charge out of watching it. Though I wasn't exactly charmed by their deeds. I didn't find them unsympathetic either, nor, I might add, did most of the members of the audience. One of the Nazis, in a rare display of humor, even juggled grapefruits, and, delighted, I sat up in bed and clapped." So...
That's so weird. At the beginning, he says, I don't even remember, but like one of the guys says something anti-Semitic, and Pat's like, that you can't say that. That's anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Now suddenly he's...
Yeah, I mean, really, like I said, it's trying so hard to just beat you over the head with, this is a bad guy who does bad things. But we'll talk more about it later. Then there is a scene in which he gets so fed up with Lewis and wants to be with Courtney and is fed up with Courtney being with Lewis that he follows Lewis into the men's room of one of these clubs and attempts to strangle him to death. And it just it just turns Lewis on, and he thinks that Pat was into the bathroom because he was trying to have sex with Lewis. And they spend the rest of the book, like, dodging one another, where Lewis is just popping up where Pat is and being like, oh my god, can we please talk about what this means for us? And Pat is so uncomfortable by the concept of being assumed to be gay that he just does not, like, he runs away whenever he gets the opportunity. Now we start getting into Pat having not great experiences with sex workers. He hires one prostitute and one escort to have a threesome and, like, enact his fetishization of lesbians, and it's unclear what he does, but at the end it implies that he injures them in some way and they leave alive, but he has gotten violent during the interaction. There's a Christmas party that Evelyn throws. They go to a couple of clubs, and here's when he runs back into his ex, Bethany. They arrange to hang out sometime. He ends up hanging out more with Paul Owen, and then he gets Paul Owen drunk, takes him back to his apartment, and murders him with an axe, which is another, like, famous scene from the movie. After murdering Paul Owen, he goes to Paul Owen's apartment, packs a to-go bag, and then changes his voicemail to make it sound like Paul Owen has gone to England on a vacation to kind of, like, cover up his steps. Then we get to the point where Pat is having lunch with Bethany, and this kind of gives us more of a picture of Pat as a college student, where he wrote a poem that he's very proud to present to Bethany. And I'm not going to read the whole scene, but basically she reads the poem. It's really poorly written and also really racist and in, like, a vernacular English that is making fun of AAVE, including the line, "Black man is da devil." And once she's finished reading it, she says, he's, like, trying to get her input on it, and she says, "I can see that your sense of social injustice is still intact." And so clearly he was still this way in college. He's not changed. He then convinces her to come back to the apartment with him, and because he was embarrassed by the whole situation, he brutally murders her. And this is your first toe in the water of, like, hey, this is a really fucked up book, maybe. This is worth noting if you are deciding to read this book. If you get to a scene that is too brutal for you, don't read any further, because there will be something worse later on, almost certainly. So, brutal murder. The book's really making you question whether or not you actually want to read it. Pat continues going to clubs. He has dinner with Jean a couple of times. He has an interesting behavior around Jean where it almost seems as though she has, like, a calming effect on him or makes him more of an introspective person, and she clearly seems to actually see something in him. He who knows why, but he maintains throughout the book being, like, relatively nice and forthright with Jean, who is also, like, nice and forthright with him. We can talk about why that is later, possibly, but it's just interesting to note. Then we get a private detective visiting Pat at his office to ask about Paul Owen, and this is when Pat finds out that actually a couple of people, after he murdered Paul Owen, have reported seeing Paul Owen in England. And now we're getting into the, like, people look like one another, they assume that other people are other people, and so you're really not sure, have people seen Paul Owen, or have they seen somebody that looks like Paul Owen? Did he actually murder this guy or not? It's really leaving everything up in the air. in order to, like, decompress and calm down, Pat and Evelyn take a trip to, like, Tim Price's vacation home for the summer. They end up spending enough time alone that Pat, like, starts getting really deeply introspective with himself and kind of coming to terms. And so we get that one of the first, like, interesting introspective monologues where he says, "There wasn't a clear, identifiable emotion within me, except for greed and possibly total disgust. I had all the characteristics of a human being, flesh, blood, skin, hair, but my depersonalization was so intense, had gone so deep, that the normal ability to feel compassion had been eradicated, the victim of a slow, purposeful erasure." We get back to the city. He has another threesome, this time with one of the same prostitutes and another woman who is just part of his social circle. Kills both of them. It's brutal. Then he goes to the zoo and he stabs a random kid in the throat, which is fucked up.
Like in public.
There's then a really long and funny chapter where all of the friend group are on a phone call trying to make plans for dinner, and it lasts like 3 hours of them putting each other on call, waiting and talking to their partners and then talking to women and then getting back on the call and trying to figure out who has reservations for what reservations have been canceled. Like, just showing you, like, this is how these people live their life. He ends up going back out at some point. He takes another girl home and tortures her. In the process, he now is making women watch videos of him torturing other women. And it has this whole section where it's talking about, like, essentially what it's referring to is the inevitability of capitalism grinding the poor down. And so it says, "I'm hoping she realizes that this would have happened to her no matter what. That she would have ended up lying here on the floor of my apartment." And then I'm not going to read the rest of it because it just kind of describes the state that she's in, which is not very good. But just talking about the inevitability of where all of his victims ended up, as well as where we all end up under capitalism. Then we get into him being more of a bad boyfriend. He takes Evelyn out for dinner, makes her eat a chocolate-covered urinal cake, and then he breaks up with her.
Yeah.
He keeps spiraling. He starts eating parts of the women that he's killing and carrying guns to the gym. There's an interesting scene later on that is him hanging out with his friends, and he actually tries to confide in them a little bit of, like, "I am not doing very well mentally." And it goes, "Tuesday night at Bowley's in No Man's Land, a fairly unremarkable marathon dinner. Even after I tell the table, listen, guys, my life is a living hell. They utterly ignore me. The group continuing to argue about allocating assets, which stocks look the best for an upcoming decade, hard bodies, real estate, gold, why long-term bonds are too risky now, etc., etc." I felt like this was really playing on the concept now of your network is your net worth, where, like, your friend circle is useful only as a means of expanding your own personal wealth. And as a result, it's really stripping away what friends are actually there for, of, you know, caring for you and listening to you when you're in the middle of a mental break. He, after this, ends up going on a rampage through the city, killing multiple people. He has an out-of-body experience, and during this, he calls his lawyer and basically confesses to everything that he has done up until this point.
Oh, is that when the police are like they chase him?
Yeah.
Don't the police chase him?
Yeah, the police do chase him for a while, and
Allegedly.
he ends up... Yeah, potentially. He ends up hiding out in his office building when he's making the call. Yeah. He's continuing to sleep with Courtney, have dinner with friends, be a scumbag. He goes back to Paul Owen's apartment and finds it totally clean, not at all the way that he left it, and it's on the market for being sold by a realtor. he has dinner with Jean again. His life's falling apart, but he has a moment of clarity while talking with her that I thought was really interesting. I think that I'll save this one to read during the analysis, but it's like it's another one of those moments of like stark realization of who he has become as a person. And you kind of leave this chapter thinking, wait a second, are he and Jean going to get together? Are he and Jean like really good for each other and she's going to make him a better person? The immediate next chapter is him dropping a different woman off at an abortion clinic. And then as he drives away, he tells his driver, hey, whenever you drop me off at the airport, could you go back and deliver some baby toys to her as a present? Just like such a fucked up thing to do as a person. He then later on runs into his lawyer at a bar who does not recognize him, and he asks about the message that he left, and we know that the lawyer didn't take it seriously because he basically thinks that Pat Bateman is too much of a pussy to have done any of those things that they're claiming that he did. And apparently the lawyer on multiple occasions has recently had lunch with Paul Owen in London, continuing the confirmation that maybe Paul Owen is actually still alive.
Or maybe Pat Bateman never spoke to the lawyer at all.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't know.
We get to the end of the book. Pat is getting mugged by a cab driver who seems to recognize Pat Bateman as a guy who murdered a taxi driver earlier on. And then the book ends with him back in the bar with his friends, and the last line is him looking at a sign on the wall that says, "This is not an exit." Oh. And that's the book. That's American Psycho. It leaves you with a lot of questions, but like I said, it's not really trying to be a story so much as a portrait of Pat Bateman, and we can kind of expand tomorrow, or like in the next week's episode, on what that image is supposed to be, and then in 2 weeks, we'll talk about whether or not it's effective as a means of communicating the message. But were there any specific parts that you wanted to point out or talk about that you either enjoyed or particularly did not enjoy while reading this book?
I'll talk more about this like in, I guess, the analysis, but I would have never read this book if it wasn't for this podcast. Like, I don't like... I mean, I guess it's considered a horror film / novel. I don't like violence like that. I don't like watching it. I don't like reading about it. So yeah, there was a lot that I didn't enjoy, particularly all the like very detailed, gruesome descriptions of the violence. I did think the concept of like it being all unreliable was really interesting, and so I'll talk about that more. I think my favorite like thing about this is that like I hated Pat Bateman, but he cracked me up. Like I was like, this man is so funny.
Yeah.
And he like he's so obsessed with fashion. Like he's kind of like, I don't know. Like he cares so much about what he's wearing, what he looks like. He's always telling us like exactly where he got all the items of clothing on his body. He's like, my Armani tie matching my Armani suit and my Armani pants and shoes, and this one cost $5,000 and this one, and I'm like, okay, that was so important, thank you so much, I'm so glad we know now.
And that's like a big part of the book too, is not only him talking about what he's wearing, but also identifying what every other person in the bar is wearing, saying like, he's wearing a 6-button double-breasted wool suit from Dusters and Dusters or whatever, and like just really talking about exactly what everyone is dressing like, so that you as the audience can presumably understand the social hierarchy because of what they're wearing. I think my favorite part of it, that where it's doing that, is at one point he meets a couple with a baby, and he describes the couple's outfit, and then he says that the baby is wearing an Armani overalls with a Mets hat. It was so funny.
It's like, okay, fashion icon. Like,
Yeah, he's really a diva throughout the whole book. And like you said, it's surprisingly funny. There's one scene where he's talking about being at dinner with people, and the couple insists that everyone at the table orders the same thing and picks the entree. And then he says, luckily, that is one of the entrees that I had already had my secretary Jean look up and plan a meal around for me, because if it wasn't one of the ones that I already had a plan for, I was going to kill him later.
That too, all the time he's like, he's gonna go on a date with this woman at one point, and he's like, I've determined that Patricia is safe tonight, and I'm not gonna stab her in the throat or something like that. And I'm like, okay, great. Like, it's like so silly, but it's not. But it's also another thing that I hated though is the use of the word hard body throughout this book. They describe like all the attractive women as hard bodies or hard bodied. And I was like, if I listened to this as an audiobook, and so I was like, if I have to hear that word spoken aloud one more time.
But yeah, that's the summary of the book. If you enjoyed it, let us know. Be sure to come back next week where we're going to talk more about the context of the book. But before we head out today, Sydney, I do have a game for us to play where I have picked out from the book 5 episode synopses from the Patty Winters show. And then I've also picked 5 episode synopses from Jerry Springer. And I want to read it, and I want you to tell me, is it Patty Winters or is it Jerry Springer?
Oh my gosh. Okay.
So you tell me how you want to do it. I've got 10 of them. Do you want to pick a number and I read it and you guess, or do you just want me to go 1 through 10 randomly and you have to guess which one's which?
I'll pick one. I'll pick numbers.
Okay, so I've got 10 of them. Pick a number 1 through 10, and we can maybe do 5 of them. That way you don't know exactly if there's still some of a certain one left or what.
Okay. 3.
3. Surprise, I'm a drag queen.
Jerry Springer.
That is Jerry Springer. Congratulations. That was an early Jerry Springer episode.
8.
8. Women who have married homosexuals.
Is that Patty Winters?
It is Patty Winters.
Okay.
He talked about seeing that episode, and it made him so... it cracked him up so much that he thought about calling Courtney and telling her that Lewis is gay.
Yeah.
Okay, you're 2 for 2.
7.
The invasion of hedonism.
Patty Winters?
That's a Jerry Springer. Okay. 2 for 3. You got 2 more?
2. Let's go 1.
Number 1. How your pet can become a movie star.
Trying to remember if Patty Winters.
That is Patty Winters. You're 3 for 4. You got 1 more.
Okay. Let's go with 10.
Number 10. I am a breeder for the KKK.
Oh. It's not Jerry Springer.
It's Jerry Springer.
Oh.
Just to show the rest of them for folks, the ones that didn't get said that were Patty Winters' titles were Girls in the 4th Grade Who Trade Sex for Crack, People Over 700 Pounds, What Can We Do About Them, and Dwarf Tossing. And then the Jerry Springer episodes we didn't mention are Racist Kids and Woman who slept with 251 men in 10 hours. So congratulations. You either are a Patty Winters show knower or a Jerry Springer knower. Tell us now which one you identify with.
Love Patty Winters. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think that would have been really hard if I hadn't read this book.
Yeah. I thought that it would, be a little bit easier than some other games, but I thought it was really fun, so I did it anyways. But I think that is going to do it for us for this week. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to rate us 5 stars wherever you're listening. Give us the like, give us a comment, follow, subscribe, whatever it is that you can do. Be sure to tell your friends if you enjoyed it. Our intro and outro are remixes of the song 48 by Cullah. And Sydney, if people want to comment or get in touch with us places other than the comment section on this particular episode, where can they do that?
Yeah, we are on Instagram at the Satire Fire Pod, Pod, and we are on TikTok, Blue Sky, and YouTube at the Satire Fire. Hopefully gonna have lots of fun content about our guy Pat Bateman. And should I do? I feel like I had this idea. I was like, whoa, I should do like outfits inspired by Patrick Bateman, but I don't have outfits that could be inspired. I don't own clothing. Yeah, but we'll have lots of content. You can engage with us there. You can comment. You can DM us if you have something that you don't want to be seen by the public eye. Let us know. That sounded really...
And then I feel like I try to mention it at the start of every series, but we do have a bookshop link down in the description. That's an affiliate link, and it's going to have lists of some of Sydney's favorite books, some of my favorite books, as well as every book that we have covered on the podcast so far. So if you'd like to pick up a copy of American Psycho or a different book that fits into one of those categories, and you don't want to support Amazon and you do want to support us, you can pick up a book there, and that helps us out a little bit. But if you don't want to buy a book, go to your local library. So, as always, be sure to support your local library. I am Samuel.
I'm Sydney.
And this has been the Satire Fire. Bye.
Bye.
I just about come to the end of the road. Here, I've just about lost patience with you people. You get your ass out to the mountains or someplace, or hide in there and watch that damn tube. But if not, fuck it. I'm done. In fact, my sermon